Phil Hemingway is a recently elected member of the Iowa City School Board, also owner and manager of Phil's Repair in Iowa City. Phil, first of all, congratulations on your recent election to the Iowa City Board of Education. It was your third try and third time lucky. Now that you've been on the board for a few months, has your perspective changed all that much? I mean, I know that you had decided opinions about this and that when you were outside the board. Now that you're on the board, have you changed your mind with regard to anything? Or
Well, I think my thoughts are still the same as far as how I view community education and public education. But definitely questions as a private citizen sometimes don't get answered as quickly as a board member. Sometimes I don't even think the questions as a board member get answered as fast as I would like it sometimes. But definitely I have the ability to get more into the subject and have administration and the staff answer questions at a much better depth.
all right, when you were going into the race for school board, you of course had a platform you were running on, but what were your goals at the time you were a candidate? What were you determined to do once you got onto the board?
Well, a big one was trust and accountability in the district staff. There have been promises made in the past that weren't kept. Also hold administration accountable for steps and actions that they've taken. Fiscal oversight was a big one for me as well, and also curriculum for all of our students and an emphasis on career and technical education. Opportunities for students that don't go on to college.
Now, with regard to the fiscal oversight, that was something that I heard a lot about during the campaign, but I heard so many versions of the story and so many complaints coming from different directions. In a nutshell, how would you describe the problems surrounding the fiscal situation in our community schools?
Well, yeah, you have the camp that's complaining that we're not getting enough from Des Moines, that almost no matter what we get, it's not enough. Definitely we're not funded to the level that we can do some of the things that we're used to doing in Iowa City. But for me, the biggest part of the fiscal oversight is no matter what we get from Des Moines, making sure that money, we spend it wisely and prudently, and it has the most effect and the most benefit for our students.
And did you feel that our money was being misspent in recent years?
There are definitely some, and one of the things that has happened since the election is we have a financial oversight committee. And 2 board members each pay period go in and go through the district books. In fact, we had a report out on it on the last board meeting. And it's a way that board members can go in and go bill by bill what the district spends money on. And I had been, as a private citizen, I'd been doing that for years, kind of tracking what they would put out in the accounts payable in every consent agenda. And so I had an idea where the money's going, but it's an eye-opener for board members to see exactly where it's going when we buy the $3,000 file cabinets, those types of things, and other curriculum modules, how expensive they are. Some of the curriculum we purchase is very expensive. And so there's always questions on, okay, they're all legitimate educational expenses, but is this the priority we want to do? Is this giving us the best return? That type of a thing. Those discussions still have to come forward, but at least we have this finance committee which is starting that conversation. It needs to go further.
And with regard to where the money is allocated, I've been hearing some complaints from a lot of people in the school district that some schools have more resources than others and that there's a disparity there that has to be fixed. Do you see that as a problem, and if so, how should it be confronted?
Well, I haven't, I haven't had those concerns really conveyed to me, and we are in a situation where we have certain schools that have greater need than others, and one would hope that the ones with the greatest need get the greatest resources and everything like that. In fact, I had a principal at a school that felt they weren't getting enough, comparing what Zach Johnson does in Cedar Rapids with the Cedar Rapids School District with his golf fundraiser. And his golf fundraiser raises anywhere from like $3 million annually. And what he does is he gives it to the three schools in Cedar Rapids that perform perform the worst, the ones with the greatest need. And this principal of this school in Iowa City told me, he says, you know, if they did that in Iowa City, they'd divide it up between 20 schools. So it would have very little effect. It would be broken up into a smaller amount. But where you give $1 million to a school that is deficient, that can have a tremendous impact.
So if it was divided up among 20 schools here, that would, I suppose, suggest that that all of them are deficient in some way.
Well, but not necessarily that being the example, but just saying that the amount of actual money going to those schools would be minuscule as compared to getting the larger check, and what they could actually do with it would be limited.
Now, Iowa City has always had a reputation as being one of the most educated cities in the United States, even not just in Iowa. And yet we hear reports that our public schools are underperforming. Now, how do you explain that disconnect, if you will?
Well, it's true. We had our annual assessment, and we've got issues, and issues that have been going on for 10 years. We have a real problem with reading for some of our groups of students. We have, and it's at the 3rd grade level, it's at the 6th grade level, and it's at the, we measure up to junior level. And one of the scary statistics for me coming out of it is at the 11th grade level, we're close to having, 15 to 20% of our students that can't read at grade level. Now, that's unacceptable, and you can't expect to catch those students up in that senior year. So, it's important that we take the concern that every student is unique, and every student that can't meet those requirements is going to have 100% of their life is going to be affected.
And these students that are not reading at grade level, do they tend to be incomers, or does it happen with kids that have been here from the get-go, like in 1st grade onwards?
It goes, the breakdown, there's some in all categories, but definitely we face challenge with some of our students that come in. We have students that come in from countries they don't even speak English. We have a lot of English learning students that are starting off. They might not have even been in a formal school environment. So we've got a lot of challenges, and it's also families that come from a background of poverty that might be more than one generation. Those also experience tremendous challenges coming into the school environment and being successful.
Is it a problem that you are often dealing with families that just do not read at home, and so the kid has no exposure to reading outside of school?
Well, definitely, I'm sure that's affecting us in many areas. You have families under a tremendous amount of stress. Maybe a single parent household with the parent working and the student having a lack of real guidance and help along those lines. And that's something where we've got to also recognize that what we've done in the past may not have been the most successful, and look for new opportunities and new avenues to try and educate and reach these students.
And considering the rather modest resources that we have, what are some of the suggestions that you would make to get more kids reading at grade level?
Right. Well, one thing we're hoping to do, and we had an education committee meeting just last night, and we preliminarily started the discussions of opening up our libraries in our junior highs and our elementaries this summer for students to come in, check out books. I had a principal at one school talk about, there are kids that come to our schools that don't even have a book at home, and that's hard to believe, but this principal is saying, I just want to make sure that the kids have a book in their hand. They have a book, they can try and learn it, they can read it, and go that route. So that's something we're starting the discussion with. It's something too we'll work with the city. We'll also work with the county. We're a UNESCO City of Literature. We should be tying that component in as well. And we'll be looking to tap into volunteers and retired teachers to help us with this, because to do all these things, we have the buildings, we have staff in there in the summer doing work, so if we can get volunteers in there to help us with that, hopefully this is something we can do and it not be we still are under the constraints of the money that we have. So everything new we want to do, we have to find a way to make it work under the monetary restraints we have.
I understand that you are also an advocate of changing the curriculum to some degree and maybe paying more attention to vocational training. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, we're in the midst of a $1.5 billion construction boom in Iowa City, and that's just the university. That's not including business, that's not including residential, and that's not including what the school district's going to construct. We have a regional center that has career and technical programming, but we only have 2 students that are in construction right now.
Oh my gosh.
We used to have a home building program that built 39 homes with student labor in a collaboration with the Home Building Association. Phenomenal program. You look at the alumni list of that program, it's just a who's who of successful business owners in Iowa City. And it was eliminated for a lack of $60,000 for one instructor. That has to come back. And the regional center has some great things to offer us, but it doesn't meet a 5-minute bell schedule. So every time you put that curriculum further away from the school, you put up more roadblocks, or it's more difficult for the student to take the course. So we have to also look at how much of that curriculum we can get back into the schools and that we have control over, and give that student the opportunity to experiment with these career fields, and then to utilize the regional center with Kirkwood to maximize that effort, so when they graduate, hopefully they get a diploma and then they are career ready when they graduate.
Yeah, that's a point that I've always thought was very important about public schools, and sometimes in some districts the challenge isn't met. But it seems to me that we have a duty, if we're going to have public schools at all, to be able to send kids out with the diploma in their hands, ready to launch a career if they choose not to go to college.
Exactly, exactly. And Waterloo is a very good example. They're having a bond issue, like I believe it's $36 million, and a complete expansion of their career and technical education up there. And they recognize that also you have to have that niche or that enthusiasm for the student to feel connected with the school. And when you give students, and it's easy in a university town, and like your comment that we're a highly educated community, I have the discussion with some board members, and they say, when I'm talking about getting into the construction field or being an electrician or being a mechanic, it's almost like, oh gosh, you're giving up on the kid. And it's like, having a career where you may, hire an electrician and then say that, they're suffering. No, we have to find that area where that student feels special, it's an enthusiasm, they enjoy it, and they can be successful with.
I agree. I think it's absurd that some people in our community, whether they like to admit it or not, they look down on tradesmen, artisans, mechanics, and they seem to regard college as just a given. You've got to go to college.
Right.
And how did it turn into such a racket is what I'd like to know. It wasn't like that in my day.
That's true, and in fact, you know, with the political, with the caucuses and everything going up, there's one candidate that made the comment that welders make more than philosophers,
And they ought to.
Yes, right. Exactly. They do, and they ought to. Exactly. And it's a very valid point. And how we've gotten that turned around, I agree. It's unfortunate. We've also it's recognizing just the worth of work and the enjoyment. There's a very good book. I apologize. I can't recall the author, but it's Shop Class for Soulcraft, and it talks about, this gentleman talks about when he was going to college, he worked part-time as an electrician, and he said he never got tired of the joy of throwing a light switch and the light coming on.
I would believe that.
You know, and it says every time it's just like, you know, I did that. I made that happen. And I just know in my own occupation, I never get tired of, you know, taking something that doesn't work properly and making it work and doing that. And it's very rewarding, very satisfying.
So you are an auto mechanic principally, correct?
Yes, yeah.
Phil's Repair will take your car apart and put it back together again?
Well, we don't want to go too far, but yeah, we do a lot of routine maintenance and things like that. I grew up on a farm in rural Johnson County. I started off my work life in agriculture. I had a great opportunity working in Central America on Roy Carver's ranch in Belize for 5 years, and that's where I met my lovely wife. And so I've had a lot of great opportunities. And being a mechanic and being self-employed that way gave me great opportunities. When my daughter was going through school, that I was able to be at all of her functions and vary my schedule so I could be there for her and do those things. So the benefits of also just having the flexibility of doing your own time is very rewarding when you're kind of on your own self-employment path.
And when you're working with vehicles, is there a particular type of vehicle that you especially enjoy working with?
Oh, absolutely. My passion is with old Willys Jeeps. I like working on Jeeps. The old Willys flathead Jeeps are my passion.
All right. Now, I'm a complete ignoramus when it comes to Jeeps. I know, of course, the difference between a Cherokee, a Grand Cherokee, a Wrangler, and so on. But the models that you referred to just now,
They would have been you could easily confuse them with the Jeeps of World War II. Essentially the vehicle that replaced the mule for the Army. And the Jeep history is kind of interesting. And in such a short period of time, they created that vehicle and was made and essentially is a staple now. The SUV is directly a descendant of the first Little Willys Jeeps that were used in combat and everything that way.
I understand that the name Jeep came from a character in a Popeye comic strip.
Yes, correct.
There's a magical creature named Eugene the Jeep.
Right, you're absolutely correct.
And he could do anything, and
yes.
So when this vehicle was invented, it could do practically anything,
exactly.
So they called it a Jeep.
Exactly. Well, your history is 100%.
So you were down in Belize, which used to be known as British Honduras, I believe.
Exactly.
Working with Roy Carver.
Well, I worked for Roy Carver Jr., his son. When I was hired, the ranch was for sale, and I was down there from '84 to '90, and was general manager of it. And we sold the ranch to a British company. I worked for the British company for a couple of years, and then in '90 I came back home.
And your wife Anita is from that part of the world?
Yes, she is.
And you have one daughter?
I have a daughter, Monica, yes, and she's a senior at the University of Iowa in chemical engineering.
Terrific. And I suppose she went through the public school system here?
She went through the school system here in Iowa City and got a phenomenal education. I think it was kind of a golden period. She had phenomenal teachers from the beginning all the way through. Some legends. One I will mention that is retiring is Bruce Wilson. Just a phenomenal teacher, and a Mr. Mullenberg, who was a physics teacher at City High. And those two were responsible for her choosing her career field.
So you say that she went through the Iowa City schools at a time when they were really doing well and providing a quality education.
Oh, absolutely.
But they have they gone downhill since
No, no,
then?
no. Please don't interpret that. To me, it was a golden period. We do tremendous. Our AP offerings are phenomenal. If that's how we judge our schools.
AP being advanced placement.
Advanced placement. Yeah, excuse me. That way, we rank high nationally. But you know, as a board member, I'm also concerned for the students that aren't on the AP track and aren't on the college track. That that we're providing the opportunities for those students as well.
And do these students who are not in the AP track, not on the college track, do they tend to value education? Do they want to come out reasonably well educated, or is there a problem with just a lack of desire on their part?
Well, I don't think anyone doesn't want to be successful. I think they all want to be successful. But it's just whether we find that niche and that enthusiasm for them to blossom to their full potential. We have phenomenal music programs. We have band, that was one of my daughter's passions, was music, and she had Candace Weebner, a phenomenal orchestra instructor, and Dr.
She's a legend.
Yeah, a legend, yes, and Dr. Myron McReynolds, which I'll put a plug for. Dr. McReynolds, he's been selected as the national band leader for Iowa by a national publication. So he's deserved he's gotten the recognition that he deserves that way. But yeah, we've got phenomenal programs for a lot of students, and it's a passion, and it keeps them in there. And definitely, if you want to improve math and science scores, having that musical component, it's not a coincidence that you're valedictorians and the students that test very high also have that musical contingent. So that's a very important that we provide those offerings as well.
Do you feel that in general the Iowa City Community School District sets high enough standards?
Oh, we set very high standards. The most important thing is that we accept it. We want it from everyone. And that's something that we have to make sure that it's not just some students we hold to a high standard. We want to hold everyone to a high standard. But then again, we also have to recognize that not everyone wants to go to college. And those that want to go on this other track, we have to make sure that we can give them a high standard education in the areas of their interest.
Now, in any school district, I imagine there are going to be some kids who just don't want to be there and are not going to cooperate any more than they absolutely have to. What do you do with these, you might call them incorrigibles, who you are obliged by the law to keep them in school,
right?
But they just don't want to cooperate.
Well,
how do you make sure that they get as good of an education as they can get?
Right, exactly. We've got a lot of different programs and steps. Our staff is phenomenal at trying to correct those, get those students on track. But we do also have an alternative high school, Tate, where students that don't fit in with the normal confines of a larger high school can go in, and it's a more individualized program, and so we do have that alternative. And in fact, Tate is now the regional alternative high school in our Kirkwood district. So Tate High School will get students from West Branch, West Liberty, other communities. Students can go to that, to our alternative high school. But we try to find an area where they can fit in and be successful, because we don't want to lose anyone and we don't want anyone to drop out.
All right, now you have lived in the Iowa City area for not all of your life, obviously, because you had that hiatus down south, among others, but you do recall that the school board has always been a bone of contention historically.
Sure.
And we've had some really knockdown, drag-out electoral campaigns and controversies as to how our schools are going to operate. Now, as I recall, back in the 1960s and 70s, there was a big conflict between people who wanted the schools to focus on basic skills, the 3 R's, And then there were others who wanted them to concentrate more on values and socialization, the so-called touchy-feely type subjects. Is that still an issue, or have we moved on to some other bone of contention?
Well, there's always you know, when you're dealing with the education of your child, it's always something that's everyone takes a very high priority with. And as far as, you know, right now it's pretty much mandated by the state what we're supposed to be doing. And if anything, it would be better if we had a little more flexibility that way. One of my concerns is just the testing and the mandatory. We're gonna, in 16 months, we're gonna be faced with a situation where third graders who don't read at grade level will either have to take summer school or be held back to take third grade over again. Now that's coming from the state, and that's one of the reasons too why you know, we're one thing I'm very interested in is trying to get these reading opportunities for our students at our junior highs and our elementaries up this summer, so we can try and avoid that drop off between summer and fall, because they will start testing next year or next school year on students, and if they don't meet these benchmarks, that's going to be a reality for many people.
And how is the school district going to cope with that? First of all, an increase in number of kids who are having to take second or third grade over again. And then second of all, how are you going to deal with the, shall we say, the social implications of this, the outcry from the parents saying...
The stigma, yes.
Yeah, the stigma,
exactly. Our board, our ed committee meeting was discussing that just last night, on Tuesday night. It's a big concern. Now, they're talking too that there may be a waiver early on or something like that, but then again, if we still have these, you don't get around the fact that if you have students that aren't reading at grade level, what are we doing to correct it, whether it is a mandate from the state or not? So that's going to have to be addressed. We're still working on it. As far as having the answers for all those things are still being discussed and still being worked on, but it just brings light to the fact that these are things that we can't ignore, and we're not going to have the opportunity to kick the can down the road. We're going to have to face them and solve them.
And I remember when I was in the school system, the main conflict on the school board was between the so-called liberals, who wanted more teaching of social values, and the conservatives, who were more interested in teaching the basic skills. Is there some sort of definite division on the school board today? And if so, what is the...
oh gosh, I don't know if it's...
what's the point on which you differ?
Right. One of the biggest challenges is doing what we have a history of doing with the money that we have, those challenges, and also just with testing, state requirements on testing, those types of things. There are philosophical differences. I know like I say, sometimes when the discussion goes toward the career path, some have challenges with that, and also there's so much you can put into when we're talking about elementary students, and we're trying to increase the amount of time for reading and math and science. You know, there's also so much time you can kind of cram information into a young student's mind without giving them time for recess and kind of recharging and being able to sit still and stay awake.
I dare say. And then we've got the additional problem of Common Core,
yes,
which not everybody understands correctly. I'm not sure I understand it correctly, but apparently people object to the idea that it involves too much teaching to the test.
Correct.
What's your position on that?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Common Core, and I'm a big proponent of letting teachers teach.
Okay.
We have phenomenal teachers in our community, and I think too many times we are in that situation where we are just trying to meet that test level, and then at that point we're missing the opportunity to let teachers use their life experiences.
We've got to allow that to happen, yes. And on that note, I think we've got to say goodnight. So thank you very much, Phil Hemingway, and thank you all.